Back with another versus video. It's gonna be Zeke versus Le'Veon Bell, but not the same because it's gonna be a certain year of these players. You'll compare them and see who I believe is the better one. How I do that is go by their strengths, weaknesses, and then I see what they contribute to their team and see who's most valuable to their team. And then I go by who I believe is a better player. In this instance, it's just a year, so I'm gonna say who I feel like is better for that season. Before we get further into the video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and let's go. You wonder why I chose these two players. The reason why I chose these two players is because for 2015 and 2018, these two players were arguably the best running backs in the league at the time, and they both was looked at as number one or number two. And while these two, during these time frames, was looked at as the best running backs, they was compared a lot. And a lot of discussion was made who is better, who you rather have on your team, and things of that nature. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So I'm gonna start off with Le'Veon Bell case first, and then we'll go over to Ezekiel Elliott. Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers was a beast, to say the least. 2017 was his best season, was the reason why I chose that year. In that season, he had a little over 1,200 rushing yards off of 323 rushing attempts and 9 rushing touchdowns. He also had 655 receiving yards with 85 catches and 2 receiving touchdowns that season. In that season, he also had an 80% catch percentage, which led all running backs who had at least 50 catches that season. He was named first team All-Pro for the second time in his career. This was his third time being the Pro Bowler. Back in 2017, he was multiple yards per game. Had the best since 2013 with 129 that season. He was able to also had the most yards by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first 5 seasons. And shake off defenders and hurdle players, and one of the best visions in a running back that season. What made Le'Veon Bell so unique and different from other running backs was his play style. In a league where most running backs get the ball and they sprint and burst into whatever hole or gap they see is open, he took the opposite approach. He took his time, more patient when he got the ball, and see blocks unfold, and then he'll run into open holes or gaps, and then get his yards. Which is crazy because back in that time, no other running back was doing that in the league. He would literally get the ball, wait, or tiptoe into the block and see what's going on and read the linebackers and how the defensive linemen get out the blocks, and then he would go the opposite way. I would say he started a new wave. But what puts him on top of all the running backs that season was his catching ability. He was able to catch the ball like a receiver, run routes as a receiver, but as a running back, though, there was no running back that season that was doing that at the time. And he was able to lie down wide, do slants, fade routes, stop routes, in routes, out routes. He was able to do all types of routes. And he was able to catch the ball and make an impact on the receiving end. And his catch percentage was at 80%, so it was almost guaranteed that when he gets the ball thrown to him, he's catching the ball. So, like, he was that dude, and he was able to line up against DBs or linebackers. Even though I said all that, the NFL players voted him number 5 that season in the top 100, which means he was the best running back that season. He was also looked at as one of the best players that season, also not just somebody that was just good at his position, but somebody that was good in the best in our league. Now let's look into his weaknesses. His weaknesses that season, and you could say his whole career, was pretty much run blocking. He wasn't the best run blocker. And I would say being disengaged, because at times he would get disengaged in the game if he don't get the ball enough, or he feel like the game is not going his way, or he gets in tantrums sometimes and he doesn't want to play to the best of his abilities. And not that I mentioned that his weaknesses, he also had a tendency to be overly patient too much by not going into gaps or not making the right cuts when he's supposed to because he waited too long. So sometimes it backfired against him, but a lot of the time it worked out for him that season. Now let's look into the playoffs. That season, the Steelers only played one playoff game. They lost in the divisional round to the Jags, 45-42. Le'Veon Bell did what he had to do that game. He had 67 rushing yards, on 16 attempts with 1 rushing touchdown. And he had 9 catches, 88 yards with also another touchdown. And even though the Steelers did lose that game, Bill showed up that game. Now, if they talk about Ezekiel, so you can't blame him for the reason why I chose 2018 Zeke is because the year before he was suspended for 5 to 7 games, somewhere between that, by the NFL for off-the-field issues. So we're not going to include that season. We're going to include the next season. It's a better comparison between the two. So in the 2018 season, Zeke had a little bit over 1,400 rushing yards for 304 rushing attempts, with 26 catches and 567 receiving yards, with 6 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns. And he had an 81.1 catch percentage and a little over 2,000 yards from scrimmage that season. He was named second team All-Pro and selected to his second Pro Bowl that season. And he also led the league in rushing that season. This was the season that kind of put Zeke on the map because his rookie season, he did lead the league in rushing, but also his second season he had off-the-field issues, so wasn't sure that if he was going to maintain that success or he was going to fizzle out due to off-the-field issues and things of that nature. But with him proving this year, leading the league in rushing and showing that his style of football is still in play and can still win games. His run style was more old school, smash mouth football, and just a running back that will straight run you over without bully you and just manhandle you with speed and the weight he had. And he also had a mean stiff arm, and he was also looked at as one of the best blockers that season. Zeke weaknesses, one of them was catching the ball. Even though he had an 81.1 catch percentage that season, that's kind of deceiving because most of his catches catching the backfield or from screens, so it wasn't really lined out wide or running route. And his other issue was mainly fumbling the ball. He had 6 fumbles that season, which was his second highest for running backs that season. And he was losing the ball a lot, and most of them wasn't forced fumbles. He was just losing the ball, messing up with handoffs, or wasn't focused, or whatever the case may be. And in that season, he went to the playoffs, and he played 2 games. In a wildcard game, he played against the Seahawks. He had 26 carries with 137 yards, and he had 1 rushing touchdown with 4 catches and 32 yards. He was basically the reason why they won, and he helped the Cowboys control the game and get the dub. The divisional round, he basically got shut down by the Rams, which you can't argue at the best defense that season. He had 20 carries with 47 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, and he had 2 catches for 19 yards. Now I got all that said, now I'm about to tell you who I believe is the better version between the two, 2017 Bill or 2018 Zeke. This was both of them when they was at their best, and both of them was the vocal points of their offenses pretty much. But from what I see, it's really more of a preference. The reason why I say it's more of a preference choice because it's between whether you want a running back that can catch the ball and run the ball and do a little bit of everything, more of a complete back, versatile back, or would you rather have a running back that's more just a strictly running back that can run downhill, they can catch when need to be, but nothing too crazy, they can block for you and stuff like that. And with Le'Veon Bell, I just feel like he can do more things. Like I said, he can go out and catch the ball, he can run the ball if needs to be. He can block from time to time. I'm saying the best blocker, but it's good enough. He can also just do everything, and running back can do it more. And Zeke can do that as well, but just not on a higher level than Le'Veon Bell, in my opinion. But that's not to take away from what Zeke can do. Zeke can catch the ball as well, and this season was his best season he actually had catching the ball wise. And Bell had less of a fumble issue than Zeke had going on. But really, you can compare the two all day long, but it really just comes down to who do you want on your team and who you rather have pretty much, because one wasn't clearly better than the other. And stats and base success and how they played showed up. Before I end the video, I thought to look at, since we talked about a certain year of these players, let's look up to how they're doing now. And so 2018, the following season, the reason why I didn't try to compare that version to Zeke was because Le'Veon Bell held out that whole season for a contract dispute between the Steelers and him. They couldn't come to an agreement, so he decided to sit out instead of taking a pay cut. So when that offseason came, he turned down a 5-year, $7 million deal with the Steelers and signed with the Jets for 4 years. And we went to the Jets in 2019, He had 789 rushing yards and 461 receiving yards, which isn't too bad, but compared to what he did in Pittsburgh, it was a shell on himself. So pretty much it just wasn't fucking with him for real. And then he got what he wanted. He got released by them, and then he went to the Chiefs, and then we know what happened with them. So now he's free agent. And with Zeke, he had the next season he had over 1,300 rushing yards, and then the past season he just got done. He ran 979 yards. So he's been doing his thing. I'm not gonna say he's been bad, but he's been doing pretty good. And even though I did choose Le'Veon Bell as this version, easily Zeke proved that he's the better back for the long term. And
to me, I hated what I saw Le'Veon go through because I felt like he should have got paid as an athlete, as a playmaker, not as a running back, because he was much more than that, and he was the workhorse of that Pittsburgh Steelers offense, right? To me, he opened up the passing game for Antonio Brown, for Juju, for all the other guys, for Ben Roethlisberger, because he put so much pressure on the defense to focus on him. To Zeke off the football field, because I think the world of him. I think he is the best running back that our game has to offer. And, hopefully he can, him and the Cowboys can figure this thing out so he can get paid because,